Bore da, croeso i'r raglen arbennig hon o Westminster Watch. Don't worry, you haven't lost the ability to speak English. That was Welsh for welcome to this special episode of Westminster Watch. Welsh has been spoken for over 1,000 years and is thought to be the oldest language in Britain. But in recent times, speakers have dwindled, prompting efforts to protect the language. There was even an Act of Parliament in the 90s, the Welsh Language Act, which aimed to promote Welsh. We're at Carnarvon Castle in North Wales to see how people here are putting the language back on the map. I'm here to meet the Mayor, Anna Jane Evans. Many people outside of this area, certainly, and outside of Wales, will argue that the Welsh language is archaic, out of date, and not fit for modern day. What would you say to that suggestion?
Well, it's the language I speak in everyday life. I was brought up as a Welsh speaker, and if I had children, they would be Welsh speakers. It's the language I speak to everybody in Carnarvon. 80% plus of the population of Carnarvon live their lives every day through the medium of Welsh.
Why is it that the Welsh language has thrived here in Carnarvon, but not elsewhere in other parts of Wales?
I don't know. I think it's because we're stubborn. The Cofies, the people of Carnarvon are naturally, I think we've got the advantage of having the large numbers of, the 80%. When you've got 80% of the population who speak it naturally every day, it helps, but that's becoming more of a challenge.
Do you feel that the Welsh language is under threat?
It's always been under threat.
Tell me more about that.
Well, it was back in the 1800s, you weren't allowed to speak Welsh. Children were punished for speaking Welsh.
She's referring to the Welsh Not, used by teachers in the 1800s when schools encouraged the use of English, seen as a more commercial language. The knot was a piece of wood, often tied round a student's neck if they were caught speaking Welsh. Whoever was wearing the Welsh knot at the end of the day or the week was often severely punished.
That inferiority complex has remained. It's been a scar on the Welsh psyche.
Is the Welsh language sufficiently used throughout education?
Well, I went through a Welsh medium education, yes.
And is it now?
Yes, it is. It's a huge advantage to have a different window of the world and a different, it gives you a different vocabulary. There are words in Welsh that simply do not translate into English, just as there are words in English that don't really translate into, it's different. It speaks of it's our heart language. It's the language my mother spoke to me. It's the language I speak to God. It's the it's a deep part of who I am. It's always under threat because there's a huge immigration of people coming in and buying second homes.
From England, mainly?
Mostly from England, but not always from England.
You think that's what's putting the language under threat because more and more people are just speaking English?
Well, one of the biggest problems we have as Welsh speakers is that we're completely bilingual. And if there's an English-speaking person in a group of people, we normally would speak English because we feel it's rude not to include them. If English speakers go to France, or if Welsh speakers go to France, the French wouldn't think of speaking English because there was one English person there. We read that the take-up of Welsh language amongst 5 to 15-year-olds is actually dropping. That must pose a threat for the future, doesn't it? It is a threat, yes.
What do you think can be done about it?
Well, I think having the Welsh medium education as the norm and as the opportunity for every youngster and child in Wales is the obvious way forward, really.
So finally, let me ask you, do you think in 100 years' time, people will still be speaking Welsh here?
If you'd asked that 100 years ago, some people would have said we won't be speaking Welsh. But I think now we will definitely be speaking Welsh in 100 years.
Anna Jane, Mayor of Carnarvon, diolch for joining us here on Westminster Watch.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, thank you.
So, do the people of Carnarvon share Anna Jane's passion for the Welsh language? We sent our reporter, Liam Askin, to the streets to find out.
Why is it important to keep the Welsh language alive?
Well, it's our heritage. I mean, I've always spoken Welsh since I was I'm now 72. So since I was a little girl, I've been brought up in Welsh. And I think it's important. My children speak Welsh. Now my grandchildren speak Welsh as well. So as I say, it's our heritage and I want it to stay like that.
Well, I've just been to a cafe and had a really excellent breakfast. And the people in there were so friendly, speaking English, but when they're together they speak Welsh, which I've no problem with whatsoever. And it's just nice to see. And these languages will die out unless people do that.
Mae'n bwysig iawn i dyfodol Cymru ac Cymraeg ac y iaith i barhau fel pobl yn dechrau siarad o. Felly, os ni'n dysgu pobl ifanc wan i dysgu Cymraeg yn llafur, fel mae pob yn well off.
I work as an OT in hospital, and I think having skills in the Welsh language is so important because people, you know, if it is their first language, you must make every effort to communicate with them in that language.
In South Wales, lots of people lost the Welsh language, and now so many more Welsh schools have opened, and people, you know, grandparents are really pleased that their grandchildren are now being given the opportunity to learn Welsh.
I think generally we're pretty lazy and we should make more effort.
And at school, should it be the first language taught or should it be English?
Well, I don't know. I think it should be in the curriculum, but whether it's the main language, I don't know. Not too sure about that.
Should Welsh be taught instead of English at school?
That one I'm a bit on the fence on, because when I was growing up, the way that they did it is we were taught in Welsh and English. Personally, I think that is a good compromise, because the reality of it is, if you're going to be trying to get a job in somewhere that's not Wales, if you've learnt everything in Welsh, all of a sudden, whatever science or whatever you've learnt, all the terms that you know don't work outside of Wales. That could be an issue. I don't think they should be teaching Welsh exclusively, but teaching in both languages, definitely.
So how is the campaign to save the Welsh language going? Well, in 2016, the Welsh Government launched Cymraeg 2050, an initiative aiming to achieve 1 million Welsh speakers over a 24-year period. But it's been a rocky ride. When it launched in 2016, there were an estimated 843,400 Welsh speakers, or 28.3% of the population. By 2018, that had risen to 898,700 speakers, nearly 30% of the population. But since then, the number has fallen again, and last year there were 843,500 Welsh speakers, just 100 more than when the campaign started in 2016. But since the population has grown, it's only 27.4% of the population, the lowest percentage recorded over 8 years. Trying to turn the tide is Ysgol Gyfun Cymraeg Plasmor School in Cardiff. Dr. Rodri Thomas is the head teacher here. Dr. Rodri, thanks very much for talking to us. Well, tell us, how important is the Welsh language to you?
It's given me access to so many opportunities in terms of activities, in terms of the culture of Wales. Wales has a history going back thousands of years. The language goes back so long, and there's so much out there that the language gives you access to. The poetry, the music, the dramas, the creative side is one of the real strengths of Welsh language schools, because the language of Wales is associated with lots of creative people, and it's so important to me that we all have access to that.
If you are talking to a young student, in today's world, what is probably one of the oldest languages, certainly many say the oldest language in Britain, what are the selling points to them as to why it should be important to them?
There's two aspects to this. There's the language itself, but also the advantages of bilingualism. The reality is, in education in Britain, the teaching of languages is poor, and the development of languages is poor. Your only students who really leave secondary school bilingual in the UK are those attending Welsh medium secondary schools, because they leave bilingual, fluent in Welsh and English. And there are so many advantages, and studies have shown in terms of brain development, in terms of developing your own skills, of having a full level of bilingualism. And it's so common around the world. We're unusual in the UK in having so few people who are really truly fluent in more than one language.
Do you think it's a case of you're in a challenge to preserve the Welsh language, or is it a case of we want to try and make the Welsh language flourish?
I want everyone to have access to their full culture and their whole history. And they can only do that if they have access to the literature and music and wider experiences to the medium of Welsh.
Do you think the language is actually under threat?
Languages are always under threat. English internationally is a threat to many languages. We're not the only language that has that discussion. You hear the discussions of English against other languages in countries, or examples like Spanish versus Catalan, Breton versus French. It's a challenge. We're not seeing a pattern now where parents are actively not passing their own language on to their children.
That means the parents need to be on board with the mission, even if they don't speak the Welsh language. And presumably it means all your staff have to be on board. Do you have that whole holistic support? Is it ever challenged, ever questioned?
No. The whole point of a Welsh language school is that you're developing the language in pupils. And you can only do that and make them fully bilingual by having the language all around them. So that means that all our staff have to be able to speak Welsh, because it's not just the lessons, but all the way the school works is through the Welsh language. Parents make a choice. You know, in Cardiff, there are 18 secondary schools. There are 3 of those are Welsh medium. So parents have to actively choose.
Did you speak Welsh as a child in school?
Yes.
And when you're in school and you still do teaching as well as being the head teacher here, do you ever get any sort of pushback at all? Do you find that you're trying to conduct a lesson as you do in Welsh, but you have some resistance at times, and they'll push you to speak English?
Teenagers, by their nature, like to rebel. Whether that's their school uniform, whether that's the language, whether that's the expectations, whether that's punctuality, they will always want to rebel. But the important thing is that we work with the carrot, not the stick. We encourage, we support, we push, we don't punish.
What do you think about attempts outside of the education system? But one thing the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament, is quite committed to is the growth of the language. Do you think there's even more things that could be done?
I think that the best way to develop the language and grow it is at the grassroots level. The government has a role to support the organisations and the people working at that grassroots level, but we know as teachers that often, if you're talking about young people, you're better off getting young people to talk to young people rather than us old-fashioned people, us oldies, who pupils might respect but think that we're out of touch.
Let's get into the politics then. MPs in Westminster take an oath in the House of Commons when they join Parliament, and many MPs have taken that oath in Welsh as a statement of pride in their homeland and a commitment to protecting the heritage and culture of their constituencies.
Yr oedd yn addo, trwy gymorth a goruchaf.
A byddaf yn ffyddlon ac yn wir da'n gar, Fawr Rhyddi, and Brenin Charles a'i taifion.
And that goes not just for Welsh, but for other minority languages in the UK, like Cornish and Gaelic. Nearly 300 miles from Westminster is the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament. I'm meeting Mark Drakeford, former First Minister of Wales and now Language Secretary for Welsh Labour. You've set out an ambition that by 2050 there'll be 1 million Welsh speakers. That, in some senses, had a little bit of a setback, hasn't it, with the 5 to 15-year-olds, where it seems there are less people in that age group taking up the language. Does that worry you for the future of the language?
We want to see as many young people as possible in that position. COVID was a setback to us in that, because if you only hear English at home and you're not in school because of COVID restrictions, then the language did receive a setback. But we think we're back on track now and heading to that 1 million target.
And if I was to ask you, what are the benefits? If I was a youngster and someone said to me, go and learn the Welsh language, I think my question would be, why? What does it do for me?
Well, the first thing it does is that it opens up your brain so that your ability to learn another language, or indeed to make progress in other parts of your studies, will undoubtedly be improved. There's no doubt from all the research that learning another language early on in life makes your brain more flexible, more receptive to other forms of learning. And of course, if, as we would hope, you look to make your future here in Wales, then the ability to speak Welsh will be an economic advantage to you as well. It will be an advantage to you as you make your career in whichever part.
How would it be an economic value? Because one thinks in terms of economics. Wales, of course, you know, it's got a setback after COVID, its GDP. I'm sure you would like to see improve per head, per capita. Is learning the Welsh language a way of advancing your own interests and even Wales's interests? Would businesses look and see the spread of the language as a disadvantage or an advantage if they wanted to invest in?
No, actually, I think it's really interesting that companies that come to invest in Wales regard the fact that they are coming to somewhere that has an identity of its own. It's not just another anonymous spot on the face of the globe. You're coming somewhere that has that sense of where it is, offers you a sense of belonging to somewhere, and the language is an intrinsic part of that. So if you talk to Japanese investors, for example, the fact that they come to Wales matters to them because of that cultural, linguistic, historic significance that Wales brings with it.
How much can the government do to meet their target in reality? Because governments have ambitions, they have the vision, and they can pull certain levers. But who else do you need to support this mission to drive towards that target of 1 million Welsh speakers?
Well, families themselves are a huge advantage to us, particularly those families where there is Welsh spoken already in the family and where you can help to transmit that to future generations. Communities have a really important part to play. You know, we want Welsh not simply to be a language of the classroom. We want it to be a language that you use in everyday parts of your life. And the rugby club or the Women's Institute and places where people spend their time, they all have an important part to play in sustaining the language as well. And then beyond that, our great artistic bodies here in Wales. You know, Welsh is a language of music, of poetry, of drama, and making sure that those great institutions also play their part in sustaining the language. So yes, government can play our part, but we're just one component of that much wider jigsaw.
So when it comes to schools and the language in schools, we were hearing the case being made by some up in Gwynedd that actually there could be a propensity to mandate Wales being the only language to be taught in schools up there. Would that be a step too far, do you think, to, if you like, compel people down that road?
Well, look, local authorities are responsible for schools rather than the Welsh Government. Every single primary school in Gwynedd is already a Welsh medium school. So we're not talking about some great leap forward from where they are today. Gwynedd is the stronghold of the Welsh language. Even the Romans didn't conquer Gwynedd.
I'm told it's the capital of the Welsh language up there, I can assure you.
Yes, well, I can easily see why they would say that, although, of course, thousands of people in Cardiff speak Welsh every day as well. But in terms of being a community language, the language of everyday use, Gwynedd is probably the single most significant stronghold for the language. So an education system that reflects those facts on the ground and does everything it can to sustain the language for the future, you know, it's for those local politicians in consultation with their communities to make the decision, but it's a decision you can understand why it's being debated.
When you're conducting business here in the Parliament, is that Welsh or is it English or is it a mix?
It's entirely both. This is an entirely bilingual institution. You can contribute in English or in Welsh in every single part of how the Welsh Senedd, the Welsh Parliament conducts its business.
And would you ever like to see days set aside, maybe weeks set aside, when it is just totally Welsh to advance the cause and lead by example? What a beautiful language it can be.
Well, it is a very beautiful language, and we've had a debate this week on our Welsh language bill, which was entirely conducted through the medium of Welsh. There wasn't a word of English spoken in the 4 hours of the debate. But actually, I don't myself think that you need to set time aside. The fact that the flow of the Senedd reflects the way the language is used in Wales. People start in one language, they finish in another. You can start a sentence in English and finish it in Welsh. Welsh is woven into the fabric of the way the Senedd conducts its business.
Would you say every party represented in the Senedd believes in that free approach to it, if you like?
When I was growing up in the 1960s in West Wales, the language was a matter of political dispute and discord. And one of the things I think we've genuinely achieved over the last 30 years is that the language now genuinely belongs to everybody. Across political party, across community, the language belongs to us all. And I said in that debate, not a word of English was spoken, and yet there were contributions from all parts of the Senedd. All political parties took part. We won't agree on every single detail, but it is a shared determination to see the Welsh language flourish and prosper for the future.
Mark Drakeford, former First Minister and Minister for the Welsh Language, thanks for joining us here on Westminster Watch.
Pleasure. Diolch yn fawr.
But not everyone agrees with the strategy being deployed to preserve the language. David TC Davies was Secretary of State for Wales when he was a Conservative MP for the UK government in Westminster.
Well, in terms of preserving and growing the language, the Conservative Party are 100% in favour of this. I mean, we are a Conservative Party. We're a party that loves tradition and heritage. And of course, we're completely in favour of not only preserving the language, but seeing it grow, seeing it protected. It is a wonderful thing. And it is a much more famous person than I once said, there is no greater tragedy than seeing a language die. We would never, ever want to see that happen. So we are very supportive of that. We support the government's goal of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. But where we have a concern is over a mandate which forces people in areas to send their children to Welsh-only schools. That, I think, is not showing respect for English speakers, monoglot English speakers in Wales.
But isn't it inevitable that this language will die and wither on the vine? Look at 5 to 15-year-olds that now recently are showing a decline in interest in learning of the language. You're going to get more of that, aren't you?
I think there needs to be more of a focus on enabling adults to take up Welsh, spoken Welsh. Perhaps I personally would emphasise that a bit more perhaps than written Welsh and translating everything into Welsh. If we start to turn around to people and say, we don't want you moving in here because you don't speak Welsh, or we insist that your children learn Welsh and don't go to English schools, we're going to shut the English schools down, I'm afraid we're going to lose the positivity which is allowing the Welsh language to survive and thrive in Wales at the moment.
Back to school, and the lyrical language rings out loud and proud. These children hold the future of the Welsh language in their voices. But it will take political will, leadership and action, all working in harmony, if we want to ensure its survival for more generations to come. All that remains for me to say is diolch, or thank you, to all my guests for joining me, and don't forget to connect with us on X at Westminster TRT. But for now, from me and all the team here and the wonderful choir, diolch yn fawr am wylio a hwyl fawr am 'i tro.